Hi and welcome. I'm Mary Jo, also known as Soto, and this is my weekly update number 9. So this is where I talk about everything I completed during the week, plus a previous finish or two along the way, like the quilt behind me. But before we get into that, let's talk about some of the channel. So I finished my part 9 of my quilt top series this week. So that is now all done. Now since that's all done, now I'm going to start doing a trunk show of all my completed quilts. But we won't be working on that until probably around mid-April, just because I've got things going on. Because this week, my husband and I will be celebrating our 19th wedding anniversary. I know, wow. So also this week I did a couple unboxings. I did the Creative Notions unboxing and I did my Sew Sampler unboxing, which I just did this morning or this afternoon and uploaded. And I also have been doing videos where I've been sewing the Cotton Cuts gnomes together, which I've got the Januaries all done, and I've got it into a quilt top form, which I'll show that in a couple minutes. Okay, let's get on to the quilt behind me. This is a quilt, and it is from the book Seemingly Scrappy. And the name of this pattern was Snow in June. And there was a picture. Now this book was the first book I ever bought when I first started quilting. So this is kind of towards the beginning of my quilting journey. Now I will say, as far as the quilting goes, if you saw my weekly update a few weeks ago when I showed my first quilt, you would see that I didn't quilt anything. Well, this I did quilt. I just quilted it in the ditch along the blocks. So there's not much to show. I don't know if you could see that, but it's literally just some lines through there, and they're kind of far apart. So that really should have been quilted a little bit denser than that, but I didn't know what I was doing back then. Well, I knew how to sew, but I was just kind of figuring it out. All right, so let's get on to what I finished this week. Release my quilt tops. Now this is quilt top I finished, which is just a table topper from the Creative Notions Sew Sampler box. So that's all done. So I finished that quilt top. And I have the backing to go with it. So I just need to do some quilting on that. I'm thinking about, when I do the quilting, just doing it on my domestic and just quilting maybe a 1/4 inch away on each of the seam lines. We'll see. Oh, with that being said, also on my quilt top trunk show, I've been working through and I plan on quilting all of those quilts. And I'm starting with, well, I shouldn't say starting because I've been working on it, but I'm working through those comments down through in those parts and trying to quilt those that have commented. There's been comments on trying to get those quilted first, as long as I have backing, because some of them I don't have backing for. So with that being said, the next one I am going to quilt in my trunk show, well, I'll show that in a few minutes when I go to my quilted quilt. Now this quilt top is something I did this week. This is the Cotton Cuts gnomes. This was the January gnomes. So when it comes, it just comes with enough material to do the actual blocks. And then I used just some Kona white that I have here and created the sashing and borders around. And then I used the extra fabrics to kind of make the cornerstones that we have. Now I did make videos on this of me sewing to see how, if you're interested in seeing how I sew, I did make videos. I've got the first 2 blocks that are already out, And the last 2 blocks and the finishing for all that will be coming out this week. So that's the quilt top I did this week. Now, want to see what I actually quilted this week? Let's take a look. Now this is what I quilted this week. Now this is the back of my husband's Stonehenge quilt. And I hung it up this way just because I think the quilting really shows up on the back. If you can see that different texture. And I'll take you in for a closer look here in just a second. And then after we do that, then we'll flip it over so you can see the front. Okay, so here's what the quilting looks like on the back of this quilt. And now we'll turn it over to the front. And here's the front. So the next thing I plan on quilting on my long arm is the pineapple quilt. So when I get that quilted, we'll hang it up and take a look at it. Now again, that's from my 200 plus quilt top series. So I'm going through and looking through those comments, and I'm going to try and quilt things that were commented on first, as long as I have the backing. Now, let's take a look at what I got done as far as piecing this week. So I did get some more of my alpaca blocks. They're not a llama, it's an alpaca. And again, it's from this pattern, which is from So Fresh Quilts. Alpaca Anyone by Lorna McMahon. I believe there's an Etsy shop called So Fresh Quilts, but I got mine from a quilt shop, Tree City Stitches in Indiana. So these are the 4 I did this week. That one. That one. This one. And this one. Now I will say that these, I made the scarf backwards on these ones because I'm going to do 4 rows with 4 in, and we're going to have in each row one that has the scarf on it backwards. And these were the other ones I made that I've shown previously. That. Okay, so I have 12 of my 16 made. So I need to make 4 more. And then we can start putting it all together. So let me get these together here. Now, I worked on this Sew Sampler quilt, the Fast and Furious quilt pattern. I'm not making a table runner. I am going to make it into this throw version back here. So I snowballed 2 of the corners, and I just have to snowball the other 2 corners, which I have pinned together. And then these blocks were already made. So I did that. And then I have also worked on this Gridworks pattern with this alligator fabric. And I got this kit from Tree City Stitches in Indiana. So I've got these rows all sewn together. I made strip sets and then cut them for this. So I have those rows and this sashing rows all pinned together. I just need to sew them. So that's what I worked on for there. Then I've also worked on this Lazy Days pattern. And have a bunch of these blocks. Now I've got those pinned. Just have to sew those. And I made some strip sets, cut them, and got them pinned to make 4 patches. So that's what I did with that pattern. And then with this pattern, I worked on this leaves quilt pattern, which is a sew sampler pattern. So I sewed these half square triangles together and now have them pinned with a little square there. Just have to sew those together. And I've got the corners here sewed. I just have to, trim them and flip them and press them for those. And some smaller ones, same ones. And I've also worked on the stem of those. Again, I got this side done. Just have to do the whole stitch and flip thing on that other side. So I worked on that. And then I worked on a Creative Notions subscription box. That blue table topper I had shown earlier was a Creative Notions box, and since I was done with that, I decided to pull out the next Creative Notions box. And this Creative Notion box had like a sewing machine mat and something else in it, which I didn't really want to do. But they also had like this subscription block of the month. So I decided to use my fabrics to make these blocks, which are kind of like those. And I'll put it together maybe with some sashing and borders. So I cut all of this fabrics out. I've got them pinned together. There's a bunch. So I got that out, got that pinned. Sew and work on that. Again, I really like the pins. And the last thing I worked on as far as piecing is my Creative Notions gnome quilt. There we go. So last time I had this border on. So I sewed the top this top polka dot fabric. Then I sew the side border onto this, and I've got the top border pinned, top and bottom, so I just need to do that. And then I have one more border to go around it, which will be these gnomes. That goes all the way, and then that one will be done. So that is everything I've done as far as quilting and sewing this week. Let's take a look at what I did in cross stitch. Now this is a previous cross stitch finish which I had done. It was a hands-on design pattern. Now it's officially spring, so that means I can take all of my winter off and put my spring on. So let's do that. Now that is just magnets, so I can do that. Take off that. Put on my little hoop. And take off my little hanging thing. Now these are hands-on designs patterns. All right. And I got my spring on. So there's my little spring thing. Oops, it fell. We'll fix it. They do stay on the wall. Alright. Let's try this again. Here we go. And then this just hangs on my wall. So that was just a previous finish. Now for what I'm actually working on. This was just the bag that I got in our Stitch Quarterly, and since I've already cross stitched, I just used it for our next project, which is this. And this one's going to take me a while to get done. This is the Christmas band sampler. And yes, it's quite long. And I'm using a 16 count on this. And this is my progress that I've made this week. Because I didn't have any started on this last week. So this is what I've done this week. It's just that. So that's what I did in cross stitch. So, what did I do in crochet? Well, I finished this. This was the Enchanted Cardigan from Leather Co. Now last week all I had to do was finish the edging on this all the way around, which I did do. Now with that being said, this is actually very big. Now it'll work for my purposes here. I mean, it works perfectly fine. However, since I had a lot of this yarn left over, I decided, let's do it again. And I just went down 2 hook sizes. And this is where we're starting at. Just a big rectangle. So we'll see when it gets done if I like it better than this. Because like I said, this one will work fine. It's just really big. So that brings me to my diamond painting. And this is where we are so far. Now, since this is small, I just kind of work on one whole color at a time. Where larger ones, you usually want to break it up into sections and do each section at a time. But because this is a small one, I'm just doing it one whole color at a time. And I have just got done with number 18. And there's 32 collars. So just over half. Way there. As you can see, like the top of the barn and stuff, I still have to fill in. And that barn, most of the truck's already done. Alright, so that's everything that I've managed to complete this week. Alright, till next time when we talk about more of my cool to stitchy things. Bye!